I had just finished my first session of therapy. I was heading for the door when the therapist stopped me and said, "Luke, for the next 3 years, I would like your number one goal to be learning to accept grace." I thought, what the hell? You only just met me. How could you possibly give me an overarching life goal? But over the next 3 years, I found out that she was absolutely right. I was chasing perfection when I should have been accepting grace. To explain, you need to know three things about me. First, I'm a Christian. Second, I'm a perfectionist. And third, I am obsessed with Stanford. Part 1, Grace and Stanford. I have always been a Stanford superfan. From day one, Stanford has been my home. My parents both went to Stanford. My younger brother and sister were born at Stanford Hospital. And my family lived nearby in Mountain View. And I had a happy childhood until when I was 8 years old, my family moved to Paris. Paris was beautiful and had delicious food and exposed me to different cultures. But I hated living in Paris. I was so homesick. I longed for the days in California when I would run around my big backyard with my neighborhood friends. I would beg and beg and beg my parents to move back home. And finally, after 3 years in France, they told me that we were moving back to the US. I was overjoyed. I was so excited. And then they said the word Virginia. Virginia, I thought, didn't you say we were moving to the United States? I learned that Virginia is in fact a state in the United States. We moved to a town called McLean, right near Washington, D.C. And after my first year there, I thought Virginia was like just all right. It didn't feel like the picturesque homecoming I had imagined. But then I went with my childhood best friend to a summer tennis camp right here at Stanford. We got to live in the dorms and hang out at Tressiter and eat hot dogs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it felt perfect. I remembered how my parents had said Stanford was the happiest time of their lives. And that's when it clicked. Stanford was the perfect place to be. So in 7th grade, I told my parents I was going to Stanford for college. They said, Luke, it's really hard to get into Stanford. To which I responded, well, you both got in and I'm smarter than you. For all of middle school and high school, I had only one goal, to get into Stanford. I threw myself at school. In 8th grade, I took 3 math classes in the same year. 3. This obsession hurt my friendships. I would turn down invitations to hang out with friends so I could do extra credit assignments. My parents would encourage me to spend less time on school and more time with friends. It especially frayed my relationship with my younger brother, Rob. He would come into my room and see if I wanted to play a game, and I would scream at him to get out because I was studying. I didn't see him as a friend. I saw him as an interruption. I wish so badly I had hung out with him more. Today, we are friends, but we're not really close friends. I wonder if we could have been closer. My hard work had another cost, anxiety. I felt stressed constantly. In my mind, unless I did everything perfectly, I had no chance of getting into Stanford. Every grade point I lost on a test was a point separating me from my dream of going home. One night, my junior year, the stress became too much to handle. I was staring at my to-do list of assignments, with no idea how I was going to do them all, let alone get A's. And I sat staring at this list for almost an hour. I was so overcome by panic that I couldn't move. In that moment, I remembered a Bible verse, Philippians 4:6. Don't worry about anything, but in everything, by prayer, tell God what you need. And the peace of God, which is beyond understanding, will guard your heart and mind in Jesus. So I put this verse to the test. I started praying about all I had to do and all this pressure to be perfect. I prayed and prayed and prayed. And my panic went down and was replaced with calm. I was surprised. And nothing about my situation had changed, but yet I had peace. Like the verse said, it was a peace beyond my understanding. This moment catalyzed my faith. My parents raised me Christian, and I believed that God was my father and that Jesus had saved me. That's always clicked in my head. But my faith at this time was like just about knowledge and not action. There was only one time I could remember earnestly praying for something and actually seeing results. Back when I was 3 years old, I prayed seriously for a baby sister named Julia. My parents laughed this off since they thought they were done having kids. But 3 years later, I did get a baby sister, and she was named Julia. But this night, when I was 17, was the first time since I was 3 that my earnest prayer had clearly affected my life. Over the following weeks, I kept praying, just telling God about my work and my worries. And the peace stayed. And it grew until for the first time in years, I was okay with the possibility of not getting into Stanford. A few months later, at Tyson's Corner Mall, I got an email from Stanford admissions. All that loaded on my janky-ass flip phone was the word congratulations. And I instinctually just jumped up and screamed right in this man's face. And he was like, ugh. Part 2, Grace and Perfectionism. I was so excited to go to Stanford. Fall quarter felt like I had reached paradise. There was so much to do, so many people to meet. I was absolutely determined to make the most of literally everything. I signed up for the maximum course load. I went to 3 different Christian groups. I rushed a frat. I launched a startup. I even joined an a cappella group. I don't even like a cappella music. I felt super committed to every one of these things. I wanted to do them all excellently. But after a few months, I was in way over my head. I slept 4 hours a night. Once I pulled back-to-back all-nighters and went 60 hours without sleeping. I was at Stanford, the place of my dreams, and yet I felt terrible, awful, the worst I have felt in my life. My 2 best friends sat me down and said, "Hey, we're worried about you. You don't seem all right. We think you should get help." That was when I realized something might be wrong. I thought I was just overcommitted. I quit some of the groups and I took fewer classes. I got my sleep back, but the miserable feeling stayed. That summer, I told my mom, I don't want to die, but I don't feel like living either. My mom said, "Luke, I think you might be depressed." I didn't think so. I thought depression only happened to people who were victims of trauma, and I had not experienced any trauma. I went to the doctor anyway, just to prove her wrong. He gave me a test, and I thought, I'm feeling pretty good today. I'll probably score high. But then he showed me the results. I scored deep in the range for major depression. Numbers are the way to my heart. I was convinced. I started antidepressants and therapy. After talking with me for only half an hour, the therapist said, Luke, your main goal for the next 3 years at Stanford should be to accept grace. You see, I craved being perfect. I've always been a huge perfectionist. I thought I was at the perfect place, and I thought I had messed up the perfect opportunities. I felt like a failure. I was realizing for the first time in my life that I was broken, permanently broken. I could never, ever be perfect. But there was someone who could, Jesus. He lived a perfect life, and then, in an act of grace, he gave the credit for his perfect life to me. To be perfect in God's eyes, all I have to do is accept his perfection in place of my own. My imperfection was totally okay because of grace. Accepting grace released me from perfectionism, and over the next year or two, it cured me of depression. I'm still fighting against perfectionism and anxiety every day. One of the most fun tools in this fight is improv. During my depression, I took the famous TAPS 103 improv class. In improv, whatever you say or do is perfect for that scene. You're constantly giving and receiving grace. Part 3, Grace and Love. By my junior year, Stanford finally felt kind of like the Stanford I had imagined. I had a healthy balance and a really strong friend group that felt like family. Somehow, against my best wishes, my best friends convinced me to leave Stanford and study abroad in Beijing. I landed and was instantly overwhelmed. Everything was new. Everything was different. Everything was awesome. I fell in love with China and with East Asia, and even with big, crowded cities, and with someone else. On my third day in Beijing, I went to lunch with friends, and in walked this girl. I could not take my eyes off her. I ignored everyone else, and I started talking only to her. Her name was Bethany, and she was a leader, a watercolor artist, super silly, like she jumped out of the shadows and surprised me right after we met. And she was the most beautiful girl I have ever seen. I asked her out to dinner, and she said yes. She showed up, and she was super sick from a stomach bug, but she came anyway. She kept pausing our conversation to run to the bathroom to puke. So I thought, she likes me. But then she called me and said, I want to be clear. I only see you as a friend. My heart sank all the way down below the floor and into the sewer. I felt despair. I tried to enjoy Beijing, but I could not stop thinking about Bethany. I started avoiding her because I was trying to get over her, but somehow I kept unexpectedly running into her and having long conversations with her that would only make me crazier about her. My obsession with her was ruining my time in China. I prayed and prayed, and after 2 long months, I was finally able to accept being just friends with Bethany. It wasn't perfect, but it was still pretty damn awesome. We started hanging out all the time. One night, I was heading home when Bethany yelled, "Wait!" She ran up to me and said, "There's something I have to tell you." And my heart sank because I thought she was going to sternly remind me that we were just friends. But then she said, "I think I like you." My heart exploded. I was just overwhelmed with joy. This was the happiest I have ever felt. We fell in love hard and fast. We started shopping for rings after only 4 months of dating, which surprised me at first. I thought the key to a perfect marriage was finding the perfect match. Once you've recruited a promising candidate for the vacant spouse position, it should take longer than 4 months to thoroughly vet them. But a book by Tim Keller convinced me. There is no perfect match. The most important thing in marriage is not finding the perfect spouse. The most important thing is how I treat my spouse. Every day, I need to let go of my own desires and serve my spouse as best I can. That is the key to an awesome marriage. I was so ready to put Bethany ahead of myself. So ring shopping at 4 months seemed just fine. A little while later, on a thinly frozen lake that we definitely should not have been walking on, I asked Bethany to marry me, and she said yes. We've been married for 5 years. Sometimes it's super easy to put her needs ahead of mine, because making her happy makes me happy. Other times it's super hard because there are a lot of things I really, really want. I have to accept grace for the times I mess up, which is every day. But all the time, it's super worth it because I get to serve the person I love more than anything. Bethany has taught me so much. She introduced me to Texas, to Shiner beer, to hipster movies, and privilege. Growing up, I was blind to my privilege as an affluent white male. Bethany grew up very differently than I did. She helped me realize I have lived a much easier American life than most people. My eyes were finally opened to how awfully America can treat someone because of their race or gender or social status or other things. I felt ashamed. I really felt ashamed. I still feel ashamed for how little I know and how little I do to help. Bethany often reminds me not to get down on myself for this, but to remember to accept grace for my limits. Grace in pain. One night, right before coming to the GSB, I was doing a load of laundry when I froze and cried. I was suddenly in the worst pain of my life. The pain did not go away that night, or the next day, or the day after that. I stayed home from work for 2 weeks. I went to a wide range of doctors. They said I had chronic pelvic pain or pudendal neuralgia, which basically means you're in pain and we have no idea what the hell is going on. I found an online forum where others had described a similar pain. Some had already had this pain for years. Nobody on the forum had experienced a cure. After reading that, I lay down sobbing. I was so scared. All I could do was cry and pray. God responded by giving me a strange thought. What if I accepted that this pain could last the rest of my life? If I accepted that this pain was going to last, then I would need to find a way to cope. And if I could find a way to cope, I could still enjoy family and friends and work and life. Once again, accepting that I was imperfect was the way for me to move forward. The pain has lasted for 2 years so far. I've built up lots of coping mechanisms. If you've ever seen me in class get out of my chair and stand or do lunges, that's one of them. Some days I can get by with almost no pain. But it's getting worse. I'm scared of how bad it could get. The pain holds me back from school and from work and friends and parenting. I have to try to accept grace for that. My daily pain reminds me that this life is temporary. It helps me to look forward to the life after this one. Okay. Part 5. This is the fun part. Grace and being a dad. When Bethany and I got married, I thought we were totally aligned on wanting children. But in 2016, we revealed our preferences concerning the timing of said children. I revealed I thought we could have kids in like 5 years. And it turns out we were not aligned. I wanted kids when I was in my 30s and had an established career, and we had been married for a while. Then I was 24 and we had only been married 2 years. Bethany's older than me. She was almost 30 and she wanted kids soon. It took me months of introspection to fully understand why I did not feel like having kids just yet, when Bethany did. It wasn't really about my career or my age or my marital experience. It was about fun. I desired hobbies and long vacations and parties with lots of wine and cheese and bourbon. I thought kids could be fun, like if we played sports or did science projects. But mostly I thought having a kid would just be a lot of work and not much fun. Through prayer, once again, I realized there was something else I desired. Love. I wanted to invite children into my love as a father and Bethany's love as a mother, and hopefully someday God's love as their father forever. I realized that when I'm dying, I probably won't wish I had more time to have fun. I think when I'm dying, I'll wish I had more time to love my kids. So one morning, I slipped a note into Bethany's birth control pills saying, "Can we have kids now?" She met my bid. One sunny afternoon in Golden Gate Park, Bethany told me she was pregnant. We were so happy. But then it turned into an ectopic pregnancy where the embryo doesn't properly implant. We had to end the pregnancy to protect Bethany's life. We were in shock and in mourning. We felt like we had killed something that we loved and desperately wanted. Bethany sat sobbing. All I could do was hug her and pray. I desperately wanted to comfort her and dry her tears. I had to accept that I could not be her comfort. Only God could. But a year later, we had Clive. Clive is so silly. Yesterday, he yelled, "Pillow fight!" But he didn't pick up a pillow. He just wanted me to hit him with a pillow. He's also so cuddly. He's always running up to me and yelling, "Hug, hug," and wanting to hug me. And 5 months ago, we got Tove. Tove is so sweet. He smiles, this huge smile, whenever we make eye contact, and he's always down to play and laugh. Together, They're Clivey and Tovey. Clive adores Tove and often runs over to help feed him or rock him. I think they're going to be really good friends. Parenting can be hard. I'm constantly managing stakeholders with conflicting priorities. And these stakeholders have a lot of leverage over my sleep. But remember how I was worried that having kids would not be fun? Turns out I was dead wrong. Being a dad is so fun. Playing with Clive and Tove and Bethany is the best part of my day. We often start the mornings just like rolling around on the bed, just like tackling each other and tickling each other. And it's like my favorite way to start the day. When I'm having fun with my boys, I'm often overcome by thankfulness. Children did not have to be enjoyable. God could have had us evolve in some other way. Natural selection would have worked it out. But I get a crazy amount of joy from my boys, a joy I do not deserve. I know I'm not the perfect dad. Perfect. I've already made tons of mistakes, like teaching Clive the word penis. Side note, if anybody knows how to get a 2-year-old to stop shouting penis all the damn time, please hit me up. I need to accept grace for my shortcomings as a father. I know they will only become more and more apparent as the kids get older and parenting gets more complex. And one day, I hope that my children will accept God as their perfect father, not me. All right, finally, grace going forward. Let me tell you, the GSB is a hard place to resist chasing perfection. It's so easy for me to wish I got close with more people or took advantage of more opportunities. And I often beat myself up for how I've decided to use my time. So I need to accept grace. And I need to pause and be thankful for the fantastic 2 years I did have, and the incredible, loving, caring, thoughtful, compassionate, hardworking, badass people I did meet. Y'all really humble me, and y'all inspire me. Deep down, I think I'll always crave being perfect, and yet I'll never be perfect, at least not in this life. That's why it's so important for me to accept grace, so I can stop chasing perfection and just focus on loving God and loving people.